Catherine. I'm sorry I'm not seeing you in person today, but this will be a video lesson for you, and I'm going to make your lesson actually just all about rhythms, because remember we talked about is either last week or the week before, we were going to go over dotted rhythms, because they're a little bit tricky, so that's what we're going to do today. So let's pretend we're in 4/4 time, just because it's a common one, and it's one we know how to count. So if we just had quarter notes, I'm just going to draw them as lines just to save some time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, easy peasy. I'm going to get a different marker. So when we're counting these, we know each one beat would be one quarter note. So each quarter note would get one and. Oh no, that might be my only marker. It's not a very good one. Okay, that marker it is. So we know each quarter note is one and. So we have 1 and, 2 and, 3 and 4 and here. So I use a check mark, or a plus mark, I guess, for and instead of writing out the whole word and. It's just faster, but that's what it signifies, and. Okay? So we're just going to erase that, save some room here. But that means that each of these is equal to one beat. So a lot of people will get into the habit of confusing just the 1 as the beat, but that's actually only a half a beat. For the full beat, it's 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. And the reason that the and is attached to the note is that we're breaking each quarter note in half. If we're just counting quarter notes only, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're counting the eighth notes as well, just because it helps us in the future. So when we put that together, we have 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and, but the quarter notes, still just as fast, we're just counting more precisely. 3 and, 4 and. Whoops. Wow, it went all the way under the piano, the cap. Okay, so next let's talk about eighth notes. Just draw them the same just to save time. Okay, they're not the most beautiful eighth notes in the world, but we get the idea. So 1 and, 2 and, 3 and 4 and here. So there it's a lot easier to see half of a beat belongs to each number and each and. So hopefully that makes sense so far, because we're going to move on from that concept. Let me just go get my eraser here so I can make some room on our lovely board. Okay, so we know quarter notes, we know eighth notes. What if we have a mix of them, or something in between, which would be a dotted quarter note? So let's put this counting in the back of our minds for a second. Let's just talk about what dotted notes are. So let's start with a half note and a quarter note. So we know that a quarter note is just worth one beat, and we know that a half note is worth 1, 2. So whenever the counting is little and off to the side here, we know that there you go. When it's little and off to the side here, we know that it's just observed, but it doesn't make a sound, so it's held. So we have 1 and then 1, 2, but the 2 doesn't make a sound, it's just held. Now, if we have a note that looks like this, I'm sure you remember this from your piano studies, but it's worth 3 now. So a lot of people will fall into the habit of thinking, oh, the dot made it from 2 to 3. That must mean that the dot means you add one beat. Not always the case. So with a half note, because it's worth 1, 2 already on its own, the dot makes it worth 3, because what the dot does to any note that it's attached, it adds half the value. Well, there you go. Now the pen's working good. So it adds half the value. So because this is 2 on its own, half of 2 is 1, of course. So that means it adds on 1 and makes it 3 altogether. But if we look at a quarter note, which is just 1 on its own, if we, I made it all messy. There you go. So if we put a dot on the quarter note, if it's already just 1, that now makes it 1.5 beats, so 1.5. So let's talk about how we count those now that we understand dotted notes a little bit more. Let's go, oh boy, this doesn't want to erase super well. Okay, and let's go a little bit further into that too. What if you had a note like this that's worth 4 on its own? if we add a dot to that, think in your head for a sec how many beats it would be worth. Say it out loud. Okay, and if you said this number out loud, you would be correct. It'd be worth 6 because we have 4, and then the 2 adds half, so that would be 2 because half of 4 is 2, so it equals 6. So unfortunately, we do have to do just a little bit of math, but it's pretty simple math on these ones. So now let's go back to 4/4 time here, and let's take some real life examples and practice counting. So we have 1, 2, let's do some eighth notes, 3, and 4. So this will be our first example. So the way I want you to start thinking about counting for these, quarter notes are just one beat, as we know, so you're going to write 1 and then a small and to show that it's observed but doesn't make a sound. 1 and, 2 and, 3, and here we get a big and because this and actually makes a sound. And then we have 4 little and. So I'm just going to play all these rhythms on middle C so we can go through them. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if you are counting in your head with 1 and, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Hopefully that makes sense. You're a pretty smart kid, so I'm sure it does, but it's kind of tricky to understand, and that's okay. So if anything in this video you don't understand, make a note of it and remember to ask me questions at your next lesson. Okay, let's do a little bit of a more challenging example now. So what if I had a dotted quarter note, an eighth note, which by itself, remember, just has this little swoopy tail. And let's do another quarter note, and let's finish with some eighth notes. Now, this is a little trickier to count, hey? So, let's start with what we know. We know that a quarter note on its own is worth 1 and then this dot is worth half of a beat. So here's where it gets tricky because you're gonna write 2 here and here. Because remember, 1 and, 2 and. This is one beat, this is another beat. So if I want it to be a beat and a half on my first one, we have to just couple them up differently. So if I want to divide this, here we have 1 and a half and half. So that's how we would divide it. 1 and 2 and. That's how we write that. And then this one, simple, 3 little and, because we don't hear it, and then big 4, big and, because we hear both of those. So the way you would hear this rhythm on the piano, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, let's do one more example just because it's never a bad idea to practice extra here. So our last example, let's do 2 eighth notes. What the heck, a dotted quarter. And let's do another eighth note and another quarter. So kind of the same, just flip the order here. So we have 1 and, because we hear it, 2 and then there's that number 3 for that extra half beat, and 4 and. So I know it's a little bit tricky and you would not be the first person having a little confusion on this, and you certainly won't be the last. I was a little bit confused when I first started learning this too, but hopefully taking this 10 minutes or so and sitting down and going through it, hopefully it makes a little bit more sense for you now and you feel more confident counting and practicing. So that is your video lesson just on that concept. I'm gonna do more work for your lesson plan though, so check your lesson plan for the rest of my notes. This is just the video portion of it, so check your lesson for the rest, okay? Good luck practicing, have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye, Katherine.